All right. Hi, I'm Effie, and today I'm going to talk about how to get started with public speaking. I work at Lottie. We are not the animations. We are a different Lottie. We are building tablets for kids. And I speak at Android conferences. For about 4 years now, I travel to different places and speak at different Android conferences. And I want to walk you through the journey of getting started in public speaking. And a lot of this talk is going to be an overview, and I put some links at the bottom of my slides for y'all to look through later. I'm going to post them online, so you can check out more resources and more ways and more people who have spoken about this topic before. And I want to start with, why do public speaking to begin with? And I'm gonna say this mainly about me, but public speaking has given me a lot of networking. There's a lot of benefits to public speaking in terms of like pooling for knowledge and getting other people's help in building and giving talks. There is sort of a subnet of networking, of community, of other speakers to usually engage with. A lot of conferences give opportunities to speakers, like a speaker dinner and other networking events that connect between speakers. The other thing that it gave me was some credibility. If I talk about a topic and I learn a topic and I become more knowledgeable in it, it gives me the credibility to talk about it and to say that I know this stuff very well. It gave me a lot of very deep knowledge about my talk content. So when I start a talk, it's completely different than writing code in that specific domain. It means that I have to study the beginning, start, and end of a topic instead of maybe copying a snippet from Stack Overflow or even reading a blog post. I have to really get a very deep understanding about the thing that I'm talking about. It helped me get a lot of technical support and help, again, from the community and from networking. It really increased my mentoring skills, my communication skills, my leadership skills. It's really useful to be able to tell a story and to present something in a way that other people can understand. And this also really increased my tech skills as a result of that. And for me, it's exciting, fun. I get to meet friends. I get to travel around the world and see places I've never been to before. I've never been to Paris before, for example. So this is really fun travel for me. Now, the first thing I want to cover is speaking and work. So a lot of people think speaking is just for me, is just for my own personal brand, it's just for myself. But this is really not the case. Speaking helps your employer as well, because you're advertising them having skillful people who speak at conferences. This really helps recruiting. It helps promote the brand of the company that you work at, and many companies encourage people to speak. I know the first reaction of many people is like, hey, speaking takes time. It takes time away from your actual engineering. But by learning a topic, I know it better, I can speak about it. I also bring these skills back to work, because if I spoke about something technical that is related to my work, I studied it deeply. And like I said, it really helps with, again, networking, which will bring both skillful engineers back to your company. And it also helps me have somebody to go to or reach out to my network if I'm having difficulties, if I'm having bugs, if I'm having questions, if I need to exchange knowledge with other people. So again, this would make me more productive in my work. All right, so say I'm convinced. How to get started? What the first thing we want to do? The first question I often encounter is, or the first statement that a lot of people make is, I got nothing to say, or I don't have anything to talk about. And I want to tell you right here, everybody has something they can give a talk about. Everybody. And again, I linked at the end of the slides to a great talk by Chucky that covers this exact thing, how to get ideas for topics, how to sort of keep a list of ideas of topics to cover. And everybody in this room has done something interesting or unique or new or fixed a complicated bug or done a bunch of stuff that you can absolutely give a talk about. And this is the other thing that is very important to remember. You don't have to already be an expert to talk about something. For once, if you're a complete noob and you're learning a new topic, this is super fascinating to everybody else who is new at this topic and they're learning about this thing. Because we've all been new at something at some point, and when you become expert, you often forget those first steps, those first hurdles that you went through. And if you are new at something and you're documenting them and giving a talk about them, this is really awesome and very much in demand at conferences. And this is, again, the same thing. Not many getting started talks versus very deep dives. Conferences, committees often have a lot of very experienced engineers, and they like seeing those getting started talks because they wouldn't necessarily think about them themselves. Expert will give some really deep dive into something, and I can tell you that I've done very successful talks about getting started with images on Android, for example. These are talks that conferences are constantly looking out for. And the third thing is that you can definitely learn a topic as you write it. So again, you don't have to know the topic end to end before you start. You can do research, you can do outreach, you can do a lot of stuff to build your story. So this is another thing that I've done, which is find a topic I'm curious about, or find a topic that looks cool, or find a topic I think is interesting but I don't know a lot about, and learn it by giving a talk. And this brings me to this topic of a popular topic versus an interesting topic. So it's easy to say, yes, let's submit a talk about Jetpack Compose. Everybody likes Jetpack Compose. Everybody will want to listen to it. But the reality is that every conference these days is getting more than 100 submissions on this topic, and they're very likely to choose only 5 of them or very few of them, and they might even prefer people who are very experienced in those topics already. So you gotta find that balance between something super popular and something that would be interesting and new and bring your own point of view and hasn't been spoken about a lot or excessively when it comes to Jetpack Compose, for example. So find that balance and figure it out is super important. All right, so I have my idea. I think I want to start giving a talk. My next advice would be to start small. So start in your company, start in GDG meetups. They always are looking for speakers. They are constantly on a search for more maybe inexperienced speakers to get started with. And these communities are very welcoming, they're very supportive, they're very small and local, and they're super easy to start with. Now, okay, we crossed that threshold and we're ready to submit to bigger conferences and talk in larger conferences such as this or DroidCon. And now I want to submit my abstract to some CFP, and I want to talk a little bit also about this speaker bias that does exist in our field, where known speakers basically just have to say their name and they can get a talk in. They don't have to work super hard. So one, I want to say this is only relevant for maybe 2 or 3 people. Like a lot of people who are still kind of mid-level, they submit those abstracts. They still work hard to get accepted to conferences. So these speaker biases, also conferences are having this recent change where they really try to move away from having those speaker biases. For example, they would judge your abstract without your name on it. So they wouldn't know who submitted this abstract. And regarding the actual abstract and CFP submission tips, you're writing your abstract. Unless your chat, be descriptive about your talk. One sentence about your talk will not convince the committee that you know what you're talking about and you're qualified to give this talk. But don't write too much either. I've seen abstracts that last for that are like 2 pages long, 3 pages long. At this point, it's a blog post. It's not a talk. You're not convincing me that you can bring something else to your talk that hasn't already been in your abstract. The other third thing to remember is that it's really okay for a talk to grow after submitting your call for proposal. So you're submitting it, you might not have your talk ready yet, you don't really know exactly the ins and outs of it. Start by submitting a CFP. It can change. It can change even up to like a day before the conference. This will be the thing that the audience eventually sees as like the summary of your talk. So try and make it relevant. If you changed your talk along the way, try to change your abstract as well. Now, there's a lot of like how to write abstracts in very descriptive ways, like write about the problem, write how you solved it, write what the audience will take away from it. You can find that also in other talks that I've linked to. But I also find the way that works for you. If you try to really follow a pattern and you're sort of not following your own style, then you're not going to get a lot of success either. So try to find your style and the way you want to write an abstract. And it's literally the way you want to read an abstract. This is another trade secret. Everyone's talks get rejected. It's not a personal thing against you. It's not only you and nobody else. And you'll see a bunch of other people who are like you who got accepted. And it's not a personal mark against you or your skills or your speaker career. Literally, it's a game of numbers. There's going to be conferences. There's going to be people applying. And not all conferences will get all talks. So really, it's not about you. It's not about your like personal anything. Which brings me to my next point, which is just keep submitting to CFP. It's literally a game of numbers. If you got accepted to too many conferences, that's the next problem. Don't worry about it before ever submitting. First submit. Then, worst case scenario, if you're that popular, you can say no. You can say, okay, I've had too many, I'm traveling too much. First submit, then worry about the next problem when it comes along. Also, keep submitting more than one talk. It's really okay. Unless, I don't know, some very specific conferences will ask you for only one talk. Just submit. Let them pick what they like. All right. So I went through all of this. I got accepted. Now I got to write a talk. The first thing I do before I start even writing my talk is I write down the 3 things I want people to learn from my talk. And I posted them about this talk, and we are covering them as we speak. But this really helps keep the focus on really the 3 things, the story that I want to tell. Write it as a story. This is, again, something that I've seen many beginners struggle with. You open up your favorite slide creating app, and you're starting to write slides. But slides are not a story. They don't really tell anything. They either become the story, which then makes them super crowded and makes them not very easy to follow, or you kind of get stuck telling an actual story. So don't even start with the slides. Open Notepad, open whatever it is you want, write your story, write what you want to say. Think about transitions. A story has chapters, the chapters move between one another. How are you going to make all these different chapters into one cohesive talk? And once you have that, then you can write your slides or turn your story into slides. So you can either use a designated app for that, or I actually use something called Dexet, which is an app that uses markup to translate the text into slides, which really gives me easy editing because I just have my story written down and I have my chapters. Some of these words will turn into speaker notes. Some of these words will turn into the headlines. Again, writing a talk is a very big topic, and I've linked to more resources about that, how to write good slides, how to be a good presenter. Again, I put more links in the comments down below, so you can check that out later. And this is another pro tip that I originally failed in, which is your code does not need to work. People don't sit in conferences and they copy your code and then copy it into an ID and expect it to work. They just want to see the concept. So try and focus on that concept and just remove all the other distractions. And this is a super important point. When you're giving a talk, please give credit to other people if you're using their material. We are a very open community. People here love to help. People here really love to give advice and give a lot of support giving talks. But please give credit to them. There is nothing more upsetting than seeing literally your slides in someone else's hands. And I think it's really unfair to them and it hurts the community. So if you've used someone else's material, if you've used someone else's slides, if you use someone else's content, please give credit to them. All right, so the talk is written. And we come down to practice. You might feel as a beginner that you want to practice a lot. And as you become more and more expert in it, you want to maybe feel like you want to wing it a little more and practice a little bit less. I do think that practice is important, especially for beginners, and I practice my talks a lot. And the tip that I usually try and do is about an hour or two before giving a talk, I would not rehearse the entire talk because I think that just confuses me a lot. I would rehearse maybe the first 5 minutes. That usually helps to get you in the zone, and after that, you're kind of flowing with it. So just the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, go over the story, and then continue. All right, so it's talk day. This is another tip that I got that I'm using almost at each and every one of my talks. If you're getting anxious on stage, find that person. There's always at least one of them. They're sitting there, they're looking at you, they're nodding, they're paying attention. Find that person, give the talk to them. And also, if you can be that crowd, that is really awesome. This is really helping with the anxiety on stage. Finding those people, giving your talk to them. The other thing that I keep being told is talk slowly. You will always get nervous and talk faster than you think you talked. So really slow it down. The other tip I want to give you about giving talks is that the audience, the majority of the audience, wants to see you succeed. There are very few people, or literally no people in the room who sit there writing down your mistakes and coming up to you with you said this and this wrong thing. Most people come to conferences to learn, and they come to conferences to enjoy themselves. So most of the people are not sitting there being grumpy at you. They really want to see something. They want to learn something. They want this to work out. To Q&A or not to Q&A is also an important question that gets covered a lot when thinking about giving a talk and when building your talk and when creating your talk. I find it a lot of the times easier to say that instead of a Q&A, I will instead have people come up to me after the talk and ask me questions. This is especially relevant because it helps me control the conversation, and because sometimes some of the questions get very, very detailed, and super focused, hyper-focused, and it's really hard to give an answer for that on stage. So it's really hard to expect the speaker to maybe know everything there is to know, every single line of code that's been written about a topic, even if they just gave a talk about it. So if it's a little bug, if it's a little feature that didn't work as expected, if it's like a super specific use case of the tech, it's really hard to answer that kind of question on stage. However, Q&A is a good way to engage the audience. It's a good way to have this dialogue of back and forth. So to do it is also a good idea. I would then say don't put too much time into it, because again, if the questions are super specific, you get into this hole again where you kind of lost everybody else in the audience. This is another thing that I've heard people discuss a lot. Can I give the same talk twice? Should I give the same talk twice? And, oops. Let's go back. Can you give the same talk twice? And to that, I'm going to say yes. You can and should give the same talk again. You worked really hard on that talk. You spent months or weeks or whatever time you wanted to researching it, coming up with the perfect topic, applying. You should totally give the same talk again. It's not the same crowd. Like nobody other than you, the speaker, is traveling between conferences, listening to the same talks over and over again. People come to see you perform. So they're coming to this conference. They're not going to come also to DroidCon Berlin. People come to one conferences, two conferences. It's not the same crowd. So you should totally give your talk again. Now, speaking in the Android world is not a paid gig. Unlike academia or other fields where people might pay you for your time, this is more of a mutual relationship where we get a lot of perks by speaking, but not directly paid. It is, however, customary that conferences will cover at least some of your expenses and help you out if you need to travel. And of course, it's not really expected that you would spend your own money into coming into conferences. Now, a lot of companies, if we go back to speaking in work, a lot of companies who see the value of their engineers speaking at conferences would also be often willing to help you out and fund your travel and fund your stay and help you out. So there is some back and forth there. The point is, don't be afraid to ask the conference or your company. Go to them and be like, hey, I want to speak at your conference, but I need my travel reimbursed. And very often they will say yes. They are, bottom line, a for-profit organization that is trying to make some money by making a conference. All right, so I want to end by sort of telling a personal story of one of my talks. This talk idea came because I read a Linux book. And the Linux book is the Linux system programming. And it covers a lot about how to think about building an operating system and what kind of interfaces are provided to interface with those, with Linux. And it covers a lot about how Linux internals work. And it got me thinking, why do we as Android engineers know so little about Android internals? Like, there's no book about Android. How awesome would it be if there was one? And then I chatted with some people. I tried to find leads. I tried to gauge if there's an interest. And the answer was yes. A lot of people were like, yay, I want to see a talk about that coming about. So I wrote an abstract with questions because at this point I didn't have the knowledge. And I submitted it to maybe, I don't know, it was 5, 6 conferences. Again, at this point I knew nothing about like any of those questions. Like, I had no answers to any of those questions. And it got accepted. So people were really excited about it, and it got accepted to more than one conference. So now I was again facing the second problem of having more conferences than I was actually capable of taking, but that's good. That's good problems to have. So I started writing the talk, and I started writing it exactly like I told you. I wrote down the 3 things that I wanted the audience to take from it, and I started writing the story, and I started thinking about what I want to talk about. I did a lot of research related to this talk because, again, I didn't know anything about it. I read some books. There's a chapter in an operating system book by Diane Hackborn, and there's another book about Android internals. They're embedded systems. They have some of the knowledge, so I did a lot of research related to this. But I also used a lot of my network. So I reached out to a lot of people, asking them, hey, do you know anything about this? Hey, can you connect me with somebody on this and that team? And it was really, really working. People were very happy to help me out, and they really enjoyed sharing their knowledge, telling me what they know. I had this person, for example, Rob, he works on the Windows Manager team. He spent 5 hours going with me over the entire Windows Manager in a coffee shop, just like line by line, giving me a tour of the entire thing. So I mostly found out that people are super happy to answer my questions, take my calls, reach out. It was really a good experience. And it also helped me create this kind of network because now I had more people I know to reach out to in case I have even more questions or even later work-related stuff. The little drama was that I was actually sick on the day of the talk. I had to switch slots with somebody else because I had strep throat, and I was like, I cannot speak, and I have 38-degree fever. But it all worked out. I was like the last slot on the last day, and it was sort of a Hail Mary attempt to actually give this talk and not cancel it altogether. And I gave the talk. And it received a lot of positive reviews. People were very excited about it. I gave it about 5 more times, but I found out that this is my personal limit. After the 5th time, I was kind of bored already. I didn't want to give it again. And I figured by that point, yes, there's already enough recording for anybody who still wants to watch it. So that was that talk's life cycle. And that's it for today. And if we have time, which I have no idea because it's not my computer, I can take questions.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Quick question. When you say you studied, so you worked really hard for the talk, would you work on it on your free time or during work time? And if so, would you ask your companies for a lot of time to work on that, or what was your process?
Mostly on my free time, and maybe about a few days before, like 2-3 days before, I asked my company to also help out because it was, again, a very big topic. And like I said, a lot of the times if you pick something that is taken from your work, it kind of correlates. You're doing the work, you already know the thing, so you're kind of switching it back and forth with time spent on it.
Thank you for the talk. When you submit a CFP and you don't already have written your talk, how do you know if it will be a 20-minute talk, an hour talk? How do you manage the length of the talk? Because if you get accepted, how does it work with the slots you are given?
I usually can tell by the size of the topic that I picked. And I usually can tell how much beef I think I have in the topic before I approach it. If it's a little bit smaller, if it's something quicker, I would choose 20 minutes. However, I can say that a few times I've finished a little bit before times, and a few times I finished a little bit after time. It's usually okay. The other tip that I can make for like really big talks is you can often leave some room for either Q&A, or if you want to leave some room and have like a topic, like a backup topic, like, hey, I have time, here's this too. So that's also something that you can do.
Hi. I was wondering if there are bad subjects, some things where you are rejected too much so you kind of give up on it?
Bad subjects.
Something that are not interesting for any conference, or something that you end up finding anyone is not interested in?
I would say it's probably the other way around. If you're submitting to something super popular, just be ready for an intense competition, and you really got to bring a unique angle to it that nobody's done before. Otherwise, there's plenty of people who's done it before. Whereas original, unique topics are usually like bright light in front of like the committee members. They're like, yes, something that isn't Jetpack Compose. I love it. So. All right, thank you very much, everyone.